The first time Precious met Kofi Mensah, she laughed so hard she spilled juice all over her dress. It happened during a colorful community cultural festival in Accra. Music filled the air, children ran between food stalls, and dancers in vibrant kente cloth entertained the crowds. Precious had just purchased a large cup of fresh pineapple juice and was turning to find a place to sit when someone accidentally bumped into her shoulder. The cup flew from her hand. Golden juice splashed across the front of her white dress. "Oh no!" she gasped. The man responsible stared at the disaster for a moment before dropping into an exaggerated bow. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced loudly, drawing the attention of nearby strangers, "I stand before you guilty of attempted assassination by pineapple juice." A burst of laughter erupted around them. Even Precious struggled to remain annoyed. The stranger lifted his head dramatically. "If it helps, I am prepared to surrender myself to the authorities." "The authorities?" she asked. "Or, at the very least, buy you another drink." She rolled her eyes, then smiled. That was Kofi. Funny, charming, impossible to forget. By the end of the festival, they had exchanged phone numbers. By the end of the week, they had gone on their first date. And within months, they were inseparable. Every evening, Kofi called her. Every weekend, they explored the city together. They watched sunsets at Labadi Beach, danced to live high-life music at local lounges, and shared roasted corn from roadside vendors while talking about their dreams. Kofi had a way of making ordinary moments feel magical. Even a simple walk through a crowded market became an adventure. One evening, while watching the ocean waves crash against the shore, he pointed at the horizon. "One day, I'm going to travel the world." Precious smiled. "Just don't forget me when you become famous." Kofi placed a hand over his heart. Impossible. There was only one thing about Kofi that Precious found unusual. He had an identical twin brother, Kwame. Unlike Kofi, Kwame was quiet, reserved, and serious. He worked as an architect and preferred books to parties. Whenever the twins stood together, people struggled to tell them apart. Precious never had that problem. To her, they were completely different. Kofi entered every room like sunshine. Kwame entered like calm rain. Kofi spoke with his hands. Kwame listened more than he talked. Kofi laughed loudly. Kwame smiled quietly. "Even if I were blindfolded, I'd know which one is my boyfriend," she often joked. Life, however, had other plans. One afternoon, Kofi received news that would change everything. A technology company in Canada had offered him a one-year training opportunity. It was the chance of a lifetime. The night before his departure, he held Precious's hand beneath a giant baobab tree near her family's home. The moonlight filtered through the branches above them. "I'll come back for you," he promised, "and I'll wait." He kissed her forehead gently. Neither realized how complicated that promise would become. The first few weeks apart were manageable. They called constantly. Video chats filled their evenings. Kofi showed her snow-covered streets. Precious showed him sunny mornings in Accra. The distance felt temporary, survivable. Then things began to change. After Kofi moved to a remote area for a special technology project, communication became difficult. Internet access was unreliable. His Ghanaian phone number stopped working. Sometimes days passed without contact. When he managed to call, it was usually from unfamiliar foreign numbers. One week he called from a Canadian number. The next week from an American one. Then silence. Long stretches of silence. Precious found herself staring at her phone throughout the day, waiting, hoping, checking messages that never arrived. She missed him terribly. The loneliness settled over her like harmattan dust. To distract herself, Precious returned to one of her favorite routines: morning jogging. Every Saturday, she joined dozens of people exercising along a popular jogging route near Independence Avenue. One cool morning, she slowed to catch her breath after several kilometers. That's when she noticed a familiar face approaching. Kwame. At least, she thought it was Kwame. For a split second, her heart leaped, believing Kofi had somehow returned unexpectedly. Then she noticed the serious expression, the calm eyes, the measured walk. Definitely Kwame. He nodded politely. Morning, morning. They exchanged brief greetings before continuing their separate runs. Nothing more. Or so she thought. The following Saturday he was there again. This time, he stopped beside her. You run every weekend? Most weekends. I've seen you here before. She smiled. Likewise. Their conversation lasted barely 5 minutes. Yet somehow, it brightened her morning. A few days later, she encountered him again. This time at a supermarket. Precious was standing in the cereal aisle comparing prices when someone reached for the same box she was holding. She looked up. Kwame. Again. What are the chances? She laughed. Apparently Accra isn't as big as we think. For the first time, she noticed something unexpected. Kwame had a quiet sense of humor. Not flashy like Kofi's. Subtle. Hidden. The kind that appeared when people paid attention. They ended up chatting while pushing their shopping carts through the store. When they reached the checkout line, they discovered they had both purchased coffee. Your brother has infected me, Precious said. I never used to drink coffee. Kwame smiled. Trust me, it could be worse. How? He once convinced our grandmother that coffee improves dancing ability. Precious laughed. Did she believe him? For 6 months. Over the next few weeks, they crossed paths repeatedly. At jogging tracks, at coffee shops, at bookstores, at traffic lights. Sometimes by coincidence. Sometimes because they had begun anticipating where the other might be. Their conversations gradually became longer, more comfortable, more personal. Still, neither considered it inappropriate. After all, Kwame was Kofi's twin brother, and Precious was simply lonely. One evening after work, rain began pouring unexpectedly. Precious found herself trapped beneath a small bus stop shelter. She watched vehicles splash through puddles while trying unsuccessfully to call Kofi. No answer. Again, no answer. A familiar black SUV pulled up beside the shelter. The window rolled down. Kwame, you'll catch a cold standing there. She hesitated, then accepted the ride. As rain hammered against the windshield, they talked about everything. Family, work, dreams, childhood memories. For the first time, Precious learned stories about Kofi she had never heard before. Stories only a twin could tell. By the time he dropped her home, nearly 2 hours had passed. Neither had noticed. The loneliness continued growing. And so did her friendship with Kwame. One evening she visited the Mensah family home. Kwame happened to be there. You look sad, he observed. I miss your brother. He nodded. He misses you, too. That simple conversation became another. Then another. Soon Kwame started checking on her regularly. Sometimes he sent a message asking if she had eaten. Sometimes he shared photographs of buildings he was designing. Sometimes he simply asked how her day had gone. At first, it felt innocent. He was just helping his brother's girlfriend feel less alone. Nothing more. Neither of them realized that the quiet moments were becoming the foundation of something far more complicated than friendship. And somewhere thousands of miles away, Kofi remained unaware that while distance was separating him from the woman he loved, fate was slowly bringing her closer to the one person she had never imagined seeing differently, his twin brother. One rainy Saturday, Precious's car broke down on a quiet road just outside Accra. The sky had turned dark long before sunset, and sheets of rain hammered against her windshield. She tried starting the engine again. Nothing. Please, not today, she groaned. She reached for her phone and immediately called Kofi. The call rang. No answer. She called again and again. Nothing. Frustrated and stranded, she scrolled through her contacts before stopping at another familiar name. Kwame. He answered on the second ring. Hello? Kwame. My car broke down. Where are you? 20 minutes later, headlights appeared through the rain. Kwame stepped out carrying an umbrella and a toolbox. Relief washed over her. You're a lifesaver. Let's see what's wrong first. 40 minutes later, the car was running again. Instead of leaving, Kwame pointed toward a nearby restaurant. You're soaked. So are you. Then we both need dinner. They sat beneath a wooden canopy while rain drummed steadily on the roof. For the first time, Precious saw a different side of him. Not Kofi's twin. Not the quiet architect. Just Kwame. A man with thoughtful eyes and a surprisingly warm smile. When he laughed at one of her stories, she found herself staring. The sound was softer than Kofi's, but somehow comforting. For the first time, Precious realized she had never truly looked at him before. Not properly. Weeks turned into months. Kofi's calls became increasingly rare. His work schedule grew unpredictable. Sometimes 2 weeks passed without a conversation. Whenever he called, it was from a different foreign number. The calls felt rushed, interrupted, incomplete, but Kwame remained present, always present. When Precious's mother was admitted to hospital, Kwame spent entire nights sitting beside her in waiting rooms. When she received a promotion at work, he surprised her with flowers and her favorite chocolate. When she had a terrible day, he listened. When she cried because she missed Kofi, he listened, always listened. And that was how danger entered their lives. Not through passion, not through temptation, but through presence. Across the street from Precious lived a woman named Auntie Essie. Every neighborhood had one. The self-appointed guardian of everyone's business. The woman who always knew who came home late, who visited whom, who argued, who reconciled, who was secretly dating whom. Auntie Essie noticed everything. One afternoon, she saw Kwame dropping Precious home. The following week, she saw them leaving a coffee shop together. Then she spotted them walking through a weekend market. Her imagination immediately got to work. She muttered. This story is not ordinary. Within days, whispers began spreading. I heard one twin stole the other's girlfriend. Which twin? I don't know. The tall one? They're both tall. The one with the beard? They both shave. The gossip spread rapidly, yet nobody could confidently identify which brother was supposedly involved. Even people who had known the twins for years struggled to tell them apart. Ironically, the gossip became more confusing than damaging. Half the neighborhood couldn't even agree on which twin they had seen. Still, Precious eventually heard the rumors. She was horrified. Kwame was furious. We should ignore them, he said, but the gossip planted a seed of discomfort between them, a question neither wanted to answer. Were they becoming more than friends? One evening, Precious visited the Mensah family home. The twins' parents were attending a church retreat. Only Kwame was home. They sat on the veranda drinking tea. The conversation drifted from childhood memories to dreams and regrets. Hours passed unnoticed. The sun disappeared. The stars emerged. Then silence arrived. The dangerous kind. The kind that reveals truths words have been avoiding. Kwame looked at her. She looked back. Neither moved. Neither spoke. Then it happened. A kiss. Brief. Unexpected. Life-changing. The moment ended almost as quickly as it began. Both immediately pulled away. Neither knew what to say. The guilt arrived instantly. Heavy. Painful. Unavoidable. Afterward, they tried creating distance, but life kept pulling them together. Kwame became the person she called when something went wrong. The person who showed up. The person who never disappeared. People continued mistaking him for Kofi. At weddings, at family gatherings, at church, at community events. Sometimes correcting people felt impossible. And slowly, the line between truth and misunderstanding blurred. Meanwhile, thousands of kilometers away, Kofi remained unaware. He still loved Precious. He still planned to marry her. But he underestimated the power of absence. He believed love alone could survive distance. He forgot that relationships also survive through moments, shared experiences, presence, time. Then, one afternoon, everything changed. Thousands of kilometers away, Kofi sat alone inside a small airport terminal in northern Canada. Snow fell heavily outside. For months, he had counted the days until he could return home. The project that had taken him away from Precious had finally ended earlier than expected. His colleagues celebrated, but Kofi's thoughts were elsewhere. Home, Precious, the future they had planned together. He imagined her reaction when she saw him standing at her door. The surprise, the tears, the hug, maybe even an angry lecture for disappearing so often. He smiled to himself. If only he knew. After nearly 20 hours of flights and airport layovers, Kofi finally landed in Accra. The warm African air greeted him like an old friend. The smell of roasted corn from roadside vendors, the sound of traffic, the familiar voices, everything felt right again. On the drive home, he stopped at a florist. He purchased a bouquet of Precious's favorite flowers. Then he bought a small gift he had been saving for months. A silver bracelet engraved with one word, forever. His heart raced the entire journey to her apartment. This was the moment he had dreamed about. He climbed the stairs, flowers in hand, smile ready. He knocked. A few seconds later, the door opened. There she was, beautiful as ever. But instead of excitement, confusion appeared in her eyes. Kofi? The hesitation cut deeper than he expected. For a brief moment, she looked almost uncertain, as though she needed confirmation of who he was. Kofi forced a laugh. What kind of welcome is that? Precious laughed nervously. No, I'm just surprised. But something felt wrong, immediately wrong. Not enough to explain, just enough to feel. Throughout dinner, Precious kept studying him, observing, comparing, measuring invisible differences. When Kofi joked about getting lost in a Canadian snowstorm, she burst into laughter. When he teased her for always ordering the same food at restaurants, she smiled. When he launched into one of his ridiculous stories, her eyes brightened. The familiar spark returned. The man she had fallen in love with sat before her. Yet, strangely, he also felt unfamiliar. Months of adapting to someone else's presence had quietly changed her perspective, and she couldn't explain why. Over the following days, Kofi noticed small things, tiny details, almost insignificant, yet impossible to ignore. Sometimes Precious expected him to know information she had never shared with him. Sometimes she referenced conversations he couldn't remember having. One evening she thanked him for helping her mother during a hospital emergency. Kofi frowned. What hospital emergency? The smile disappeared from her face. She quickly changed the subject, but confusion lingered. Another time she thanked him for recommending a book. Kofi hated reading novels. Something wasn't adding up. Not for her. Not for him. The truth arrived unexpectedly. One afternoon, Precious visited the Mensah family home to return a folder Kwame had lent her. Nobody appeared to be home. As she entered the living room, she heard voices coming from the study. The twins, talking, arguing. Their voices were unusually tense. She wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but then she heard her name, and everything changed. We should have told her months ago. Silence. Then Kwame spoke. I know. You should never have stepped into my place. I never planned to. You let it continue. So did you. The room became quiet. Precious's heart pounded. A terrible feeling formed inside her chest. She stepped closer. Then she saw messages displayed on an open laptop. Conversations between the brothers. Weeks, months, confessions, regrets, guilt. Everything suddenly made sense. The serious version of Kofi. The disappearing humor. The different habits. The different conversations. The different personalities. The different ways of holding her hand. The different ways of saying goodbye. The different ways of saying, I love you. The puzzle pieces finally connected. She hadn't been imagining things. She had been interacting with two different men, two identical faces, two different hearts, two different souls. The realization hit her like a storm. The confrontation that followed shattered everyone. Tears flowed. Voices broke. Years of trust collapsed in a single evening. "You let me believe you were him!" Precious cried. Her voice echoed through the house. Kwame lowered his head. Shame covered his face. "I never intended for this to happen, but it happened. I know. You watched me trust you. I know, and you never told me." Every word felt like a knife. Kofi stood nearby, heartbroken, angry, confused, yet somehow understanding, because he knew part of the truth too. His absence had created the space. His silence had widened the distance. His brother had crossed a line, but he had left the door open. Finally, Kofi spoke. "No." The room fell silent. Both turned toward him. "You didn't fall in love with one person." Nobody moved. "You fell in love with different parts of both of us." The painful truth settled heavily over the room. She loved Kofi's laughter, his energy, his spontaneity, his ability to turn ordinary moments into unforgettable memories. But she also loved Kwame's loyalty, his patience, his consistency, his quiet strength. The man who always showed up, the man who was always there, the man who stayed when life became difficult. The fallout was devastating. The neighborhood gossip exploded. Auntie Essie nearly fainted when she learned the truth. For months, she had suspected something. Now she believed she had witnessed the scandal of the decade. Within days, the story spread across the entire neighborhood. Church groups discussed it. Market vendors discussed it. Taxi drivers discussed it. Yet the strangest thing happened. Nobody could agree on which twin had done what. Some people thought Kofi stole Kwame's girlfriend. Others believed Kwame stole Kofi's. Half the witnesses couldn't confidently identify either brother. The confusion became almost comical. Eventually, the gossip lost momentum. People grew tired of arguing over identical faces. Life moved on, but for Precious, healing would take much longer. For nearly a year, she avoided both brothers. She traveled, focused on work, spent more time with family, rediscovered herself, learned how to be alone again. And during that time, she learned something important. Love is not simply about who makes your heart race, nor is it only about who makes you feel safe. Real love is about choosing someone completely. The good, the bad, the mistakes, the growth. Everything. Slowly, she realized something. Every funny story reminded her of Kofi. Every beautiful sunset reminded her of Kofi. Every spontaneous adventure reminded her of Kofi. Every dream about the future included Kofi. Her heart had never truly changed. It had simply become confused during a season of loneliness. One golden evening, Kofi invited her to meet him beneath the same baobab tree where he had once promised to return. The sky glowed orange and gold. Birds flew overhead. The air felt peaceful. For a moment, it seemed as if years had disappeared. Kofi looked nervous, more nervous than she had ever seen him. "I made mistakes." Precious nodded. "I know. I left too much space between us." "You did. I thought love could survive on promises." A tear slipped down her cheek. "And now?" Kofi smiled softly. "Now I know love survives through presence." Then he reached into his pocket. A ring appeared. Simple, elegant, beautiful, like the moment itself. His voice trembled. "Precious, will you marry the right twin this time?" For a second, she simply stared. Then she laughed. The same laugh that began their story. The same laugh that made him fall in love with her. The same laugh he had missed for years. "Yes." Her voice cracked. "Yes." And beneath the baobab tree, where their journey had begun, they chose each other all over again. Their wedding became one of the most talked about events in the city. Guests arrived early. Everyone wanted to make sure the correct twin was standing at the altar. Even the pastor joked before the ceremony began. "Can somebody please confirm the groom's identity before we continue?" The church erupted with laughter. Even Kwame laughed, perhaps louder than anyone. Because healing had finally arrived. The brothers rebuilt their relationship, not immediately, not easily, but eventually. And sometimes that is the greatest miracle of all. Years later, a storyteller uploaded their unbelievable story to YouTube. The title was impossible to ignore. The Woman Who Almost Married the Wrong Twin. Within weeks, the video exploded. Millions watched across Africa and beyond. The comment section became a battlefield. She should have chosen Kwame. No, Kofi was her first love. Kwame was always there for her. Kofi changed and fought for her. Thousands argued. Millions watched. But the final message of the narration touched everyone's heart. The narrator's voice softened, and the video ended with these words. Sometimes life will place two paths before you. One feels safe. The other feels familiar. One stays close. The other drifts away. But true love is not determined by who never leaves. It is determined by who still owns your heart after every misunderstanding, every mistake, every distance, and every storm. Precious met two identical faces. She loved two different souls. But in the end, she discovered that destiny had only written one name beside hers. And that is why some love stories are remembered forever. The screen faded to black. The music played softly, and thousands of viewers sat silently for a moment before scrolling to the comments to share their own opinions about the most unforgettable twin love story they had ever heard.